Hey, friends and listeners, this is Anne-Marie Zanzal, and you're listening to Coming Out and Beyond LGBTQIA Plus Stories podcast.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Barb Rowlandson, and Anne-Marie, we are now deep into season 4 of the Coming Out and Beyond podcast, and congratulations on what has turned out to be just a fantastic season so far.
And no thanks to you, Barb Rowlandson, my brand new producer, who is kicking ass in this podcast. So I want to thank Barb and all of our guests and listeners who make this podcast so special. If you're new to this podcast, let me fill you in a bit on what we do here at Coming Out and Beyond. This is a podcast devoted to sharing stories of real people, primarily women, trans, and non-binary folks who have made the brave step of coming out maybe early in life or maybe later in life.
And later in life, it's a subjective term. I mean, we have guests on the podcast that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond. And they're from all walks of life, and they've discovered in their life's journey that they aren't quite as straight as they originally thought they were. And the lovely Anne-Marie here, our podcast founder and host, brings her signature compassion, wisdom, and insight as she interviews guests, creating a safe space for them to share their stories.
And Barb, our podcast producer and occasional co-host and guest, and maybe in the future a host, joins us regularly for the first time in season 4, adding fun, dimension, and a different perspective to topics surrounding the coming out later in life process.
So if you're someone who is later in life and early in the coming out process, here is where you are going to find inspiration and some great advice and a glimpse into the joy of what it means to come into your authentic sexuality.
So relax, kick your shoes off, grab a cup of coffee or tea, or maybe your favorite libation, put your headphones on, and join us for the next half hour or so to listen to another great, true story about coming out later in life and what lies beyond. Dr. Lulu, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Nice to meet you finally on Zoom.
I know, we met on Instagram and now we've met on Zoom. So, yeah. Dr. Lulu, can you tell me your story, please?
Well, in regards to what? To my my work. I'm just kidding. With regards to the LGBT, sure. I don't think there's a whole lot to tell. It's pretty mundane, like most people who were born in the 60s, I think I can proudly say that I'm a Gen Xer, and only 4.2% of Gen Xers identify as LGBT. So I'm I'm one of the tiny minority. But when I was 16, I went to an all-girls high school. So I knew I had an attraction to girls at a very young age. But I also went to an all-girls high school in Nigeria. So it wasn't something that I could explore, but I just said, okay, I don't know what this is, but sure, whatever. Then I was also attracted to boys. I'm like, this is interesting. Okay, cool. So when I told my dad when I was 16, I told I liked girls and boys, because we were having the conversation, not about birds and bees per se, but about me graduating from school and what are you going to do in college? And I was like, yeah, about that marrying a man thing. So this is what it is actually. And my dad was like, oh, that's fine. It's a phase. A lot of people go through that. And he was very matter of fact, very nonchalant. I was like, okay, this is my father. He's done adulting more than I have. He's lived life more than I have. He must know what's going on. Okay, sure. Now that we got that out of the way, what's for dinner? And so that's basically what I did. And I went to medical school and I just didn't think about it. I am also Catholic. So I was like, yeah, there's that part of that thing called hell. We're not going there. So whatever this is, God, I'm just going to chill out and just fall in love with the man if I can and move on with my life. And it's funny because, I had a couple of episodes of sexual assault. One was when I was 9, one was when I was 16. I was actually full-blown rape. And I don't know if you have to do like a trigger warning, because I don't know, how far, what your guests tell, what stories your guests tell. But one of the things I tell the people that I coach today is, if indeed this thing is something that, is a choice, then I should never be attracted to men ever. Because when I was 9, my innocence was taken from me by a man. When I was 16, my innocence was taken from me by a man. When I finally got married to a man, I was systematically and systemically, if I may use those words, abused in the marriage. So I should not ever want to see man again. But you don't learn that. You don't learn your attractions. You don't, let me see. I'm going to copy Anne-Marie. No, it's not something that you have any power over.
Right.
That's why when people are being persecuted for being queer or gay or trans, I just shake my head and just wonder just how deep is the self-hatred of the person who does that. Coming from a place where I was not always affirming of the queer people, because there's as you know, something called internalized homophobia.
Right.
When it's bad enough, you actually become really, really maybe even a persecutor of the same people, because you can't believe that they are living their lives out loud and you can't. Like, why is that happening?
Well, I always say that the people that proclaim their disgust with the queer community the most are often, I believe, that they're queer themselves, because they're the ones that try to.
I don't miss words when I say it. I have posts about it. I have whole posts where I say, yes, it never fails. I usually start with saying it never fails. Those who are intense homophobes are closeted gays. Those are my words. I write it. Maybe once a week I write that. I write that because it's true. And if anybody does not agree with me, it doesn't change my mind, because that's my own personal experience. That's my own personal opinion. And it is what it is. So you're right. But yeah, so that's my story. I grew up, I got married to a man, and as a physician, I worked a lot, long hours. And so I blamed myself when the marriage didn't work out, because I thought it was long hours, but really I knew in my heart that it was an abusive spouse. But again, I'm Nigerian, it's a little different. In Nigeria, women are not even seen and not even heard, but okay, you can say they are seen and not heard. Neither are children. The man has the final say. Whatever the man says is what happens. And so I had to come to terms with that as a wife of my ex-husband. But everything in my bones were like, why is he so abusive? I mean, honestly, there'll be maybe 3 or 4 months he would not speak to me, and I don't even know what I did. And then sometimes I'd be like, when finally he's like, okay, hello, hi. I'm like, okay, what did I do? He's like, well, you slammed the door really hard in February 16th. I'm like, wait, this is May. Like, like what? How did that happen? So I just was like, okay, maybe this is the way it's supposed to be. Okay, so be it. But after that marriage, after I filed for divorce, let's call it as it is. I was 42 and I decided, you know what, this is 26 years after I've told my dad that I liked girls. And I had a friend of mine that I had just this intense crush on, this like really girl crush on. She was happily married to her husband. But I that made me, and most people that have been on their podcast know her. Her name is Keisha, and I don't hide her name, but that made me realize that I still had that attraction to women. It was
a very long phase, Dr. Lulu.
Yeah, I know. I told my dad that. But she was still very married. She is still very married. But I just realized, I started thinking to myself, I say, you know what, this is not going away. Why don't I just approach it with curiosity? Let's see, what is this emotion? What is this thing? And as soon as I leaned into that, I don't know, maybe within weeks or within months of that experience, I had that self-realization. I met my now ex-wife, and I was like, yeah, this is not going to. I was so happy the day I met her. I felt so seen and so free. It was just a beautiful night, and I was like, yeah, this is not going away.
Right. I understand.
And I wish I could have told my dad or shared it with my father, just see, I told you, or something like that. But I kept it to myself. But I was like, this is so beautiful. This is so nice. And then
Mm-hmm.
And the rest is history. But yeah, I was like, yeah, this is not going away. It's
Mm-hmm.
here to
Mm-hmm.
stay.
I absolutely understand you. So besides that, of having that in common, both you and I, you have a trans child and I have a non-binary child. And I want you to talk a little bit about that experience as a mom. What was it like for you when your child came out to you, and like, how did you react? And like, what was that experience like?
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's only fair to say, because I have that second TEDx talk, that I try not to use the word coming. I don't use the phrase coming out anymore. Sometimes it's the only phrase to use, because it just makes the English or the sentence sound righter. But I use inviting in. So when my child invited us in, it was fairly reluctant the first time. That was in June of 2020 during the graduation from Stanford. And it was just a coincidence that the announcer kept saying they this and they that. My kid was getting the award of excellence from the College of Arts. And I was like, well, so who are all these other people graduating? I mean, getting this award? And that was an honest question.
Right.
Now, but before that, I already had my suspicions, and I had kind of assigned/assumed my kid was gay. I tell people this all the time, that when we ask questions, a lot of times we hear the answers that we want to hear. Because the day I asked my child, I said, so is you gay or is you not gay? She said, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard no,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't want my kid to be gay. I didn't want my kid to be. So in my mind, I was like, whew, thank goodness I dodged that one. But in my heart, I knew she never said no. She was like, Mom, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
And we left it alone. We never talked about it ever again.
How old were they at the time?
I think 12 at that time, maybe.
So was this prior to your own coming out?
No.
Your own letting in?
No. That's not what I mean. No. My kid was 12. It might have been older, maybe 16. I don't remember the age, but in high school. So whatever the age is in America when you go to high school, I know we were in high school then. So maybe 14.
14 to 18.
But
yeah.
I was already married to my ex-wife there. I was married to her at that time. So it wasn't, it's not even about the phrase. It was just like, as far as time, I think I was married to her at that time. So I had already come into my own realization. But even as I'm saying this, I knew my kid at the back of my head. I was like, one of the things I always said to her was, stop acting like a girl. You're not a girl. Just stop acting like a girl. Just stop doing all these things, all these girly things. You're not a girl. And then she would be like, well, Mom, what do girls do? I'll be like, whatever you're doing is what girls do. Why do you feel like you need to act like a girl? And I used to get irritated by it, and I just didn't want that. There's a lot to be said about this week. I had spoken to, I think on Tuesday, I spoke to a father and his wife about their son who shared with them that he's pansexual and a femme boy. And I remember them telling me that their older child is a lesbian, but that they felt easier to accept. It was easier for them to accept their daughter who's a lesbian than the son who is pansexual. And even the father said he struggled with his own masculinity. He felt that his masculinity was challenged, for lack of a better word, when he saw this. And he started thinking to himself, well, he was in the military. That there was some emotions there, but he never explored them. So what I'm saying is, society has different reactions when your daughter is a lesbian, or when your daughter is LGBT, than when your son is not. So for me, having 3 children that we assigned all 3 of them as males, I didn't have the daughter to have that experience with. But I do know that I just didn't want my son, in quotes, to be anything feminine, effeminate, none of that. Not in a hateful way, but just because I know society is like zero tolerance. And that's why, as we all know, Black trans women have the highest rate of homicides. People just do not want to see a Black trans woman for nothing, which is just unfortunate. Now, we don't care too much about, I wouldn't say maybe butch lesbian women. Yeah, we might tolerate them. But if it's an effeminate man, we just feel like there's something wrong. And that's a thought that I've had to ask myself, why?
Well, Brene Brown says this, is that women don't want to be vulnerable and men don't want to appear weak, which is about our shame, because women don't want to be vulnerable. And men, when they feel shame, it's about appearing weak. And so when somebody is, when a man appears to be more on the feminine side, there is an appearance of weakness in this society, even if it's not true, but that's what people assume. So I think that's like, as a mom, oh my gosh, I would be terrified. I'd be very scared for my child if they came out as trans female. I think it's I think there's and especially Black trans female, because we all know what's going on with that. And no wonder. I mean, like, for me as a mom, I would be right with you. As a queer mom, I'd be right with you, being like, oh God, I don't want this for you, because I just don't want you to suffer. And none of us want our kids to suffer, right?
Yeah, that is so true. And I have a different outlook. I realize that it's been our identity. It's been the story we've told ourselves to make ourselves feel better. As parents of queer kids, is an easier story to tell. Oh, I don't want my child to be hurt. Oh, I don't want the society to be mean to my child. That is true, but that is a story that we'll rather tell than I really truly, I am homophobic. I really truly am transphobic. That's what it is. I mean, we can paint it any colors we like, any fluorescent colors, and sprinkle cosmic dust on it. It still comes down to that. And so what I prefer to say, we have been conditioned to believe that anything outside of what we call norm is bad. It's not even about weakness, because we have women like Serena Williams. Her service is 85 miles an hour. I don't even drive that fast, but that's her tennis serve. So it's not even about that, but it's about us. It's a conditioning that we have refused to question it. We don't want to question it.
And it's a very big,
because it's more comfortable to believe this. Go ahead.
Yeah, and because it's a very big surprise. Like, I have a lot of my clients, when they come out and they're in like 30-ish or so, they're often been raised by very progressive liberal parents. And so they didn't think it was going to be a big deal to their parents, and it was. And it stunned them that their parents were like, oh, I don't want you to do this, you shouldn't do this, and stuff like that. Because their parents never express. And oftentimes too, people don't realize, like I always say about internalized homophobia, is like, my definition of it is that, I have found that people in our, people that have come out later in life, often are huge allies before they do. They're often huge allies, but the only person that can't be gay is me. And that's what the internalized homophobia is. And so,
or my child.
Right.
I know, but I get it.
Bingo.
Yeah, but internalized homophobia definitely is for self. Yeah, that is true. I love that. The people I worry about the most, though, as much as internalized homophobia does exist, transphobia does exist, even within the community, the people that I worry about the most are, in today's world, are the cisgendered people who are threatened by even the word cisgender. Like, they're like, wait, don't call me cisgender. Wait, but you are. It's like the word pronoun. The word pronoun, the definition of pronoun is a word or words that we use to describe a person in third person. That is the definition of pronoun. We learned that in kindergarten.
Absolutely.
But today, with just so much radical ignorance, like unchecked ignorance, if you say somebody, what are your pronouns? I don't have pronouns. What do you mean? What do you mean you don't have pronouns? What do you mean you don't have pronouns? Do you mean neo pronouns? I get it. Zir and zer, I get that. But everybody has a pronoun. Just like you're either cisgendered or you're not. Because the opposite of cisgender is not transgender. The opposite of cisgender is gender expansive or gender non-conforming, because it could be non-binary, it could be, you know what I mean? It could be any other thing.
Right. But while trans is,
yes.
Yeah.
Trans is just trans is actually under the umbrella of non-binary or gender non-conforming.
Right.
Under that umbrella of gender non-conformers, you have trans, which is a prototype. You have non-binary, you have bigender, you have two-spirit, we have agender, demi, all of these things are all underneath the umbrella of gender expansive, gender non-conforming, gender diverse. But you can't tell these people anything. You can't tell them that, but you're cisgender. What do you mean I'm cisgendered? Are you trying to insult me? What?
Well, and as a parent, it's a whole new world, right? For the parents that you work with. Like, I remember when I came out, a lot of times people I know say like, oh, I don't like labels and stuff like that. And I've never found more labels in the LGBTQ community. I mean, we have a lot of labels and it can be very overwhelming, especially for moms and dads who have never, ever thought about this before. And do you find that with so tell me how you work with families.
I think even just going back to the labels, I think, what are labels? Labels are words.
Absolutely.
That's what it is. It's what you make it mean. Because if you walk into the room and say, I'm going to use the word bitch, you can put explicit on this episode. If you walk in the room and say, there goes Dr. Lulu, the bitch, two things can happen. I can believe you, or I do not believe you. If I don't believe you, I'm going to say, I don't see a bitch here. I see me. But if I believe you, then I'm internalizing the word and I'm like, oh, that means we have to be okay with just allowing people. It's just a word, like literally, it's just a word. Labels. When I came to America, I heard that if you say somebody's fat, it's like, oh my God, they've died. In Nigeria, you can call people fat and it's nothing. It's just a word. So it's what Americans make the word fat mean. Because in my country, you can call people fat and it doesn't mean you're fat shaming, all these other things. It's an American thing because there are other countries. There's a bigger world out there with other countries and other words, and people don't lose it when somebody says that. That said, when you're in Rome, you have to act like Romans. So I get it. I get that Americans, somewhere along the line, something happened with the word fat and, oh my God. I have never had a problem with that. In fact, I'm the one that will tell you all my labels. I'm very proud of listing all of my intersectionality. On my birthday, I found 54 because I turned 54, so they're just words. My parents that I work with, just like me, the biggest word I can use to describe them is shame. Huge, huge deal. For those who are not feeling shame, they're feeling guilt. And then for those who are neither feeling shame nor guilt, all of them are feeling fear.
Okay.
Fear of the unknown. Because when they say, well, I want to accept my child, but I don't know how.
Are most of your parents religious?
It's a combination. It's a combination. I'm Catholic. So, and again, one of the things as a coach, I know you know this, I'm the prototype of the parents that I coach.
Right.
I'm Catholic. I'm Black. I'm female. I'm an immigrant. I'm all of those things. I'm a prototype of my clients. I am the number one reason, like my coach says, I am my number one testimony that my intellectual property works because it worked with me. So I'm a Christian. I'm Catholic by birth. I'm a cradle Catholic. I don't practice Catholicism anymore. I really don't practice Christianity anymore. But I mean, somewhere in my definition there's a word Christian. So yes, but Christianity doesn't come up on our conversations except if they bring it up that, I don't know what my church would do. A lot of them are more worried, like I was, of their mother, what their mother would say, because their grandparents, oh, she loves my grandson, she loves my son so much. I say, yeah, you mean your daughter? Oh, exactly. See, and I was like, the problem is never with the other person, always with you. And that is my main work, is getting them to accept that the person in the mirror is whose mindset needs to change. Because ultimately, those who will accept your child are going to accept your child. But our own biggest fear is that they might not accept me because I accept my child.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. And
And
especially,
nobody wants to be ostracized. Nobody wants to be, rejected. Get it. I get it.
what
It's an interesting situation, for lack of a better word.
what have the parents that you work with, what have they taught you as you have spent time with?
That I am normal. I am normal, because one of the things that I struggled with when I first found out was I'm alone.
Right.
Alone
Right.
in my thoughts. I'm alone in the way I feel. I'm the only one who feels this way. Oh my goodness. People can smell me when they see me. They can sense it that my child is, gay from a distance. So the one thing that they've taught me is that we are all the same. We all have radical love for our children in a very hostile world. And we're just trying to maintain. And there's just non-stop barrage of anti-LGBT laws coming left, right, and center. And also, most importantly, what you focus on gets bigger. That to me is a huge lesson that has made me this particular week, I hyper-focused on the anti-trans bills, and it took a huge toll on me that I almost canceled this interview, because yesterday I took a mental health day, and the day before, because I was just really traumatized by what I saw at the Capitol on Monday. So what you focus on gets bigger. A lot of the parents come thinking, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm like, wait, calm down. It is the same child that just yesterday, you were worried about something different. And today, all you can think about is the child is gay. And when you do that, it's going to overcome you. It's going to take over. But truthfully, their sexuality, like yours, is 1% of who they are.
Absolutely. Yeah. True. It's a
But
small,
if you make their sexuality, if you blow up their sexuality, then it becomes a big thing, because nobody's blowing up your sexuality.
Well,
straight.
but if you're straight, complementary heterosexuality, nobody's blowing that up, because
that's what I meant. Yeah, if you're straight, no one is blowing that up. But most of my parents are straight. I mean, majority of my parents are straight. I don't have any queer parents that I coach. I am the only queer parent in my coaching group. I'm just giving my allergies are flaring up. But yeah, so nobody's focusing on your sexuality.
because they're the majority.
Because, well, no, I mean that in the sense that, because just showing them how, if you start focusing on your sexuality, it's going to become a bigger thing. To not make the child's sexuality a big deal. That is the test of us. To not, as much as everything around is going on, to not internalize it and make it bigger. To know that your child still wants dinner. Your child still has homework. Your child still wants to pick out something to wear tomorrow. They still have to get a haircut. They still want to go to the store, to the mall, and hang out with their friends. These are the other things that they were doing yesterday before they told you. Those things have not gone away just because now you know. And you being able to manage your mind is the key. And so the sooner you lean in to start managing your mind, the sooner those embers will die down. Because your child telling you at 7 that they think they're trans doesn't mean that they're having sex, which is usually what people hear when you say, Mom, I'm gay. Your mom hears, Mom, I'm having sex. That's not what you said, though. You
Mhm.
said, I'm gay, you know?
Mhm.
So you were saying something.
No, but I was going to ask, are most of your parents of gay children or trans children?
I have one white mom whose child is trans. And I
Mhm.
think maybe two of them are trans. The rest of them are just LGBT. One is a femboy, one is non-binary, one is a lesbian, one is a regular gay. I mean, it's a mix. I don't coach parents of trans kids. I am a parent of a trans kid, but
But
I
you
don't
don't.
coach. I coach parents of queer kids
Mhm.
across the board. Yes. Anything
Mhm.
LGBT, anything non-heterosexual actually is what I coach.
So when you said I've seen a lot of your posts on Instagram and stuff like that, and you often talk about being a trans person or a queer person of color. What kind of obstacles do queer kids of color face from their families when when they say, "Oh, I'm gay," or "I'm a lesbian," or "I'm trans"? What types of obstacles do they face?
So when I came to America, I learned about people of color.
Mhm.
When I'm in Nigeria, everybody's Black.
Okay,
So I can usually talk about my
Black
experience
people.
as a Black person because
Okay,
I'm sure the Asians have a little slightly different, maybe similar.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah. So
maybe.
I will talk about Black because that's my experience, and actually talk about myself because my experience is essentially that of my child, except my child is in America and I was in Nigeria. So the Black child who finds himself in the LGBTQ spectrum is the exact same Black child who doesn't, except that they just happen to not be straight.
Right.
The biggest thing that we deal with is ignorance. That
Mhm.
is the biggest thing. Ignorance across the board, like we've talked about what transness means or
Mhm.
what sexuality is, and the fact that they are different. Sexuality and gender identity are different. A
Mhm.
lot of people think that sexuality is gender and so they're all the same, but they're not the same. So we struggle mainly with ignorance. It's not a whole lot different, except when you toss in this big thing called racism.
Racism. Yeah.
Then it really takes it to the next level. But otherwise, when I walk in a room, you cannot see a queer woman unless I tell you that, because I'm as stealth as it gets. I mean, I look
Mhm.
like just a regular cisgendered woman.
Mhm.
When my child walks in the room, because she's a trans woman,
Mhm.
you might notice that. But
Mhm.
for me, when I walk in the room, everything you're going to do to me, not you, Anne-Marie, everything that's going to happen to me is going to happen to me because I'm Black and I'm a woman, and maybe I have sister-law, I have an accent. Those are all part of my intersectionality. Then you toss in transness to it. Then we now have to go back first to the fact that there's transphobia across the board. So a child who happens to be Black and trans is really at the bottom of the barrel.
Mhm.
What people do forget, though, is that a Black trans adult was once a Black trans child. Most people don't think about that. That is true, because I didn't think about that. We don't
Mhm.
remember that this person they've always been
And
trans.
trans.
We're
Right.
just seeing them now as adults, but they've always been trans. And so the message I have for most parents, if not all parents, I learned that, I mean, I've known about it, but I didn't put it in this way. But on Monday, I learned one of the chants that the kids at the Texas Capitol were chanting was 2468. Don't assume your kids are straight. I thought that was so
Kids.
powerful because I've always known it. I've always told them, I said, look, the truth is there's a very high chance that your child is not straight.
Mhm. Mhm.
When a child who is transgender at 5 says, Mom, I don't want to wear that dress, you're thinking, oh, you're just acting like me. Stop acting like a girl. Stop acting like a girl. If the child holds onto their gender identity, you might never know. It's just called being stealth. But the day the child shares it through their gender expression, that day they become victims automatically. because now you can see them.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can see that they want to wear a pink wig. But why you have an Adam's apple and you're wearing a pink wig and high heels? Wait, why? Then you start judging. So this is the reason why I say many children will never tell.
Mm-hmm.
My kid didn't tell us until we found out at graduation.
With the they, them pronouns.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Many children will not tell. So I'm saying to parents, don't assume your kids are straight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we've been talking about the word assumption. We've talked about it so many times today. Assuming is the most dangerous thing that we can do to our kids. Because as parents, we assume that our children are straight. My father had my whole life planned out.
Right.
You're going to marry this guy. You're going to have this guy. Ugh. But I'm not straight, Dad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And how successful were your own parents at getting you to be who they wanted you to be?
My parents, very successful because
Say that again.
my own parents, very successful because like I'm also Catholic, Dr. Lulu. So I understand.
Your parents wanted you to be gay?
Oh gosh, no.
So then they were not successful.
Well, yeah, but I did what they wanted me to do. I got married. I had babies. Yeah, I did it. But my parents died a long time ago, so they died before my. And by the way, I call it letting in. I use
that's good. Thank you.
I call it letting in.
I saw that too. Yes,
yeah,
I saw that. I was letting in.
But I say coming out because this is the name of the podcast.
Yes, is what everybody uses.
If I named it,
I love this conversation because I'm like you. I did everything up to a point, and then I didn't do. So the truth is, I did not. My parents were not successful. If they were successful up to a point, then they were not successful. Because the question is, how successful were they? And it's a rhetorical, not for you, Anne-Marie, just overall. I just want people to think about that. When they are thinking, I can believe my child is doing this to me. When they're thinking that, I want you to stop and ask yourself, did you do every single thing that your parents wanted you to do? Even if it means marrying somebody different then you didn't do everything your parents wanted you to do. Because you can't, because the truth is you're a whole and complete human being. You're not your parent.
Yeah. So when parents come to you, you said that they're dealing with shame, guilt, and everybody's dealing with fear. How do you, and that's actually what I do, the work I do. I work with people, women coming out who are feeling guilt and shame and a ton of fear. And I understand that because I felt that myself.
Thank you for validating that for me. Thank you.
So how do you move them from the fear?
Actually, I tell them that a certain degree of fear is necessary. I'm not selling snake oil here. I'm not a voodoo woo-woo person. A certain degree of fear is warranted to do this work. But that's why the word courage comes in. Courage is fear plus action.
Right. Fair.
I'm not saying don't be afraid. Matter of fact, I want you to have some degree of fear, even though the good book says fear not. Yeah, to some extent, because it's important to have that at the back of your mind. Otherwise, we're not going to send the police out without bulletproof vests. We send them out with bulletproof vests because at least we're thinking if they shoot them, it will, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So that bulletproof vest is helping you with your fear, if you want to use that in that context. It doesn't mean that we're not stupid here. I mean, I'm not saying for you, I'm just saying generally, we are still human beings. It's okay. You wear your seat belt because of that.
Right.
So it's a safety harness, but you're not going to say you're not going to drive in case somebody's going to hit you. What you do is you're going to drive and you're going to wear your seat belt. So that's what I tell them to do. My main work is in thought work. Honestly, my main work is in mindset shifting. And a lot of times they're doing a lot of exercises, self-coaching, self-questioning, curiosity, unlearning, a lot of unlearning. Where did that come from? That original fear, original sin, so to say, where did it come from? Let's analyze your shame. Where is the shame really coming from? What is the shame about? Is it about how you're making the whole story, what you're making the whole story mean? A lot of times that's what it is. Oh, my kid is gay. Man, that means I'm not going to hang out with such and such again. And so I say, okay, well, guess what? If you're not going to if that means you're not going to hang out with this person, or this person's not going to hang out with you anymore, that means they were truly not your friend to begin with. If anybody tells you today to disown your child, they hate you. They hate you because they know that suicide is a real and clear and present danger. They know that. So if they tell you to treat your child this way, you better run. But sometimes they need someone to they need someone to show them. They already know it, but they just need me to say, do you see what your brain just did there just now? Just checking your brain. Do you see your brain? Do you see what your brain just said? Yeah, but she's my mom. Yes, but this is your child.
True.
There's a reason why God gave you this child and not your mom, by the way.
By the way.
Okay, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of thought work. I have a mom who has re-signed after 1 year. Ultimately, you have to be willing to let go of the shame, because I could tell you everything I want.
Well, it's a lot of self-work. You could
Oh my God, thank you, honey.
you could give them lots of sheets to fill out.
I can give you all the worksheet in the world.
But
and that's why one of the things I love to say that I came up with recently is that people always say change is the only constant. Change is the only constant. Change is the only constant. And I say, actually, I don't believe that. Decision making is the only constant, because sometimes you make a decision to not change.
that's
So
true.
change is not a constant.
You need to put that up as a meme on your Instagram.
Yes, honey. I think I've done it in the past. I think I wrote that. I want to trademark it. Because let's be honest. You have to make a decision to let go of the shame. You have to decide. Now, what I told myself, how long do you want to hold on to the shame? So, let's talk about that. How long have you held on to it? How long has this shame been your identity? Like, this is my identity. Okay. When are you going to let go of the shame? So you can see freedom. Go ahead.
Can I ask you, so as somebody who identifies as queer, how did you end up letting go of your shame about being queer?
Like I said, after my divorce from my ex-husband, hi, sweetheart, welcome home. I realized that the attraction was not going away. And so I gave myself permission to be curious about it. And so I tell the parents, be curious about that emotion. Whose voice are you hearing? And I heard my aunt's voice when I was young telling me that they're going to go to hell. I remember that. And then I had to get curious about that going to hell. And what did my aunt mean? What did my aunt know? Did she know what I know, that I was actually created this way? Did she know that? Which, by the way, one of her brothers is gay, so it's like, did she know that? Or was she speaking out of her own lack of knowledge? But once you know something, you cannot unknow it. So I took my time to explore that. What is this really? And then I've got this kid over here that I think is gay. What does that mean? What am I making it mean about me? That I am somehow defective. My ex-husband told me that I made the child gay. He said that. He said, I said, wait, but I breastfed 3 kids.
You didn't do that.
What about the other 2?
Yeah.
Well, so it's a lot of, like you said, it's a lot of talk, a lot of just thinking about,
well, it's very
how did it happen?
Because when we first started talking, I wrote down approach with curiosity.
That's one of my favorite words on my I don't know where it is, on my little trifold. I use the word ice.
approach.
Inclusion. Yeah, include the child. ICE is number one. When you hear your child say that they're gay, include them in just whatever they are now. I want you to include them as they are in everything else. Like not their old self that you thought, this new self, include them. So include their new names in your thought process, include their new names in their new gender, include that because that's what you did before. The second one is C. Lean in with curiosity. Like ask yourself, the questions is not, why is my child gay? It's why do I feel this way about my child being gay? That's the question to ask.
That's a great question.
Because you don't know why your child is gay.
Mm-hmm.
We try. That's where the myths and misconceptions come, right? Why is my child gay? Oh, because they were molested. Oh, because they saw a pornographic movie. Oh, because they went social media. Or we find all this, but those are their misconceptions about the queer community. So rather than saying, why is my child gay? Why do I feel this way about my child being gay?
I love that. That's a good. I'm going to steal that one.
I'm going to lend it to you because it's coming out in my new book. That's actually how I start the question. I start the book with that question.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only one in this world that's thinking about. Just that I think about. My coach teaches me to do this. She wants us to hyper focus on what your client is thinking.
Mm-hmm. So where's CE? You said IC.
The E is empower your child. Yes,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
The E is now go out there and empower your child to be all that they can be. Because I always liken the parent-child relationship to the parent holding a kite, flying a kite.
Mm-hmm.
The parent holding the little piece of rope or thread or whatever, you are actually in control of where the kite goes. However, the kite is flying on its own. Mm-hmm. So as a parent, your job is to make sure that the kite doesn't get into trees or get into too close to the electrical, wires, but you need to let them soar. And that's the empowerment part. Let them just soar and just be all that they can be. Mm-hmm. So that's ICE. And I think the other one was TAD was thank the child, ask open-ended questions. So thank you so much for sharing this with me. Open-ended questions like, how can I make your life better? How can I make this burden lighter? What can I do to help? That's open-ended. When you say how, or when you use how or what, they are usually open-ended questions. And then the D is decide to support the child no matter what. So that's TAD for when the parent, so those are the three things I came up with. TAD and then ICE. It just helps me with my parents and just helping them. It doesn't mean, because I believe in decision making, but it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, but just keep thinking about those things. And I encourage them to journal a lot, journal your emotions. I'm not going to sit here and say it's easy. But my next TED Talk, what I'm going to do next week, I'm telling them now that what if you didn't assign a gender to your child? What if you didn't make any assumptions? Because that's what we're struggling now with, all our assumptions that we made.
True.
If we didn't make the assumptions, we won't have to deal with the
if we didn't make assumptions about people's sexuality, if we didn't make assumptions about people's gender and a bunch of other stuff, people would be a lot happier.
Everybody, all of us. I would not have to deal with my quote unquote disappointment. And then my child, would not have to deal with my issues that I brought upon myself, because the child didn't tell me to assume that. I assumed that on my own.
Well,
the child had no say in it.
Right.
What do you mean you cannot? What do you mean you don't want to become a ballerina? Mom, I have 2 left feet. Yeah, but I love ballerina. Well, that's you though.
Yes.
You
true.
like.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of. So I always ask 3 questions at the end, and I'm going to wrap. Yes. This was a very good discussion. I think it's going to be really helpful for parents whose kids are letting in. So did you have a letting in song when you left your marriage and said, I'm going to be curious about dating women? Did you have a song that empowered you? Because a lot of times people really some song speaks to their heart, or not really.
I don't think so. I mean, now as an adult, I go with Who's That Girl by Eve. Is the rapper, not by Madonna, because she also has Who's That Girl. I know most people like I'm Coming Out, but I mean, like I said, it wasn't like it was just okay, whatever. But I think I like Who's That Girl. I love it. I like that she talks about, all the things that she can do, and then you ask yourself, who's that girl? Just not diminishing yourself and not,
I'm going to go listen to that.
Yeah, it's a rap song.
And so what about, did you have any books or a book or a movie that really like sort of not just about queer stuff, but a book or a movie that really like opened your mind or changed your view about things?
No, not really. I mean, the book I like, which I bought for my kids, one copy each, was just Think and Grow Rich, because I just love the message in the book. And just the fact that it's really helps me realize that if you have an idea and you believe in the idea, nobody can take it from you. Just like believing my child, just like accepting my child. Just like, like once I decided I was going to, like I said, decide. Once I decided I was going to do this, there was no going back. So that is the book. And also because I used to struggle with chronic pain, just healing back pain, the fact that our body does hold the emotions, does remember. So we have to be very careful, how we allow our emotions affect us. There's that. Let me see. But yeah, I don't think I have like a LGBT specific book. No,
this wasn't, because a lot of my, we're so much more than queer people. So, so like when I ask that question, sometimes people talk about queer books, but sometimes it's like healing back pain. It's something that just helps them. Yeah.
And you know what I've been doing for the past, and this is just maybe a little bit of a TMI, but it might help someone. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I don't know, 15 years ago, following, like I said, a very traumatic, tumultuous marriage to my ex-husband. And because I believe that listening to it, I already know that it's my emotions that are causing my body to have the pain. I believe it, but I need my subconscious to believe it. So for the past, I don't know how many days now, and I'm planning to do that for 6 weeks, 42 days of listening to that book every night. I need my subconscious to also believe it. And the last couple of days in the past, I was sleeping on the same bed, but in the last couple of days, I wake up with no back pain. But in the past, every single morning, sure enough, I can't stand still, but I want my subconscious to hear and also believe and let go of that child that was hurt and disappointed and betrayed, and all of those things that I know my body
has. Your body remembers.
Yes, yeah, because it wasn't, my ex-husband was not the worst. Living in America in fear. I mean, one of my books I wrote because somebody called the police on my kids while they were exercising in my neighborhood. That just made me so angry. I mean, I know all of those things, the rage that I'm not allowed to express. And then this past Monday, I went to the Capitol and more rage. So I know. So I'm healing my body that way. And I know as parents of queer kids, we also carry a lot of the shame and the guilt that maybe I did something, maybe I didn't do something right, maybe, And then of course, fear of what if my child doesn't come home? Those are real threats.
It's very hard to live with that fear. And I am so sorry that you have to all the time. And I know that lots of parents have to live with that, but I am so sorry that you have to deal that way. I wish the world was a kinder place.
I wish.
Dr. Lulu.
I wish.
All right, last question.
We're horses.
Last question.
Sure.
So you left your marriage at 42, went on a curiosity, found yourself. How do you describe your life today?
How do I describe my life today? It's good enough. It's good enough because now I know that I'm enough. There was a time when I joined the Air Force and was moving to Texas from North Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
the Air Force sent this big 18-wheeler to move my stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that they've never met anyone that had so much stuff. They needed 2 of those.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not a hoarder. In other words, like there's room in the house. I mean, it's not like, oh, that you have to walk through here. It's not that. But there was a time when I thought buying all these things will make me happy. And so with my ex-husband, I would go shopping for hours because I didn't want to come home. I didn't want to come to the house. Let me put it that way, because the house was not my home. I would stay out as much as I would. I spent thousands of dollars buying. Sometimes I come and say, oh, I already have these shoes. Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that. So now I realize that I'm enough. I don't need all of that to make me happy because I'm happy from inside. And another time I had an eureka moment was when I left medicine officially. And everyone was like, have you lost your mind? Like, what do you mean you're walking away from medicine? You're a doctor. You went to medical school all those years. And I had to tell them, I said, you know what? What I'm doing now is bigger than medicine.
More important.
I may not be making as much money. I went from $350,000 a year as a physician to less than 75.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm like, you know what? I cannot be happier. It's still very stressful.
Mm-hmm.
I took a mental health day yesterday, but I woke up this morning feeling, okay, let's get back into the game.
Yeah.
Let's get back into the game. So,
well, Dr. Lulu, thank you so much for coming on this show. It was wonderful to talk to you. When we stop the actual recording right now, I want to talk to you about a couple other things because we have more things in common. So.
Yes, thank God.
Yeah,
and that's what we're looking for. That we need each other. We're looking for things that connect us. Because once you peel my skin, they're the same inside.
Yes.
So I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm glad I didn't cancel it.
You've been listening to Coming Out and Beyond, LGBTQIA+ stories with Anne-Marie Zanzal. New episodes of the Coming Out and Beyond podcast drop every other Friday. You can tune in at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and at annemariezanzal.com. Be sure to hit subscribe when tuning in so you never miss an episode. And for more resources, articles, videos, and a free downloadable guide for coming out later in life, visit annemariezanzal.com.